The FIFA 2022 World Cup has kicked off today in Qatar, and widespread criticism of its attitude towards LGBT people.
In Qatar, there is Sharia law.
They say that human rights are important and that competing nations must oblige.
People have a right to love who they want, to dress the way they want, to be treated as equal citizens under the law.
Human rights, okay, great, according to whose definition? Right, your definition, her definition, she said it. Human rights, which she supports, is about the right to choose to dress. And yet, she is the person who said, I think every secularist and women's rights defender should support a burqa and niqab ban. So clearly, she's a hypocrite when it comes to Muslims choosing what they want to wear. She can tell Muslim women what to do. They can't tell themselves what to do. So you are a hypocrite,
I
madam.
think banning things that are detrimental to human rights and human values is actually a step in the direction of defending human rights.
A twisted argument worthy of the Chinese government banning people going to mosques, banning Qurans, banning a whole number of things in the name of defending Chinese values and rights. So
50% of Muslims who live here in the UK would like to see homosexuality made illegal here in the UK. Now, I worry.
Must I condemn my own religion to live here?
Well, that's your choice.
Robbie Williams, Naomi Campbell, they've all taken the 30 pieces of silver from Qatar. They've been bought by Qatar. They've sold their principles for money.
The Islamic perspective is a worldview based on the creator of the universe being the source of good and bad.
And you can have up to 3 wives, is it?
Four.
Four wives?
Can I
You can have a million girlfriends and cheating your wife in the West.
It's what about this and what about
Sometimes women get stoned in the streets in some of these countries.
Yes.
Where's the decency? Where's the public decency there?
For people to go out on the street and somehow to stone women, that's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. When gay people are determined as a separate group from straight people now, you now make these new groups up, which the West did, and then it began, that's when discrimination began. The West discriminated.
I'm sorry, but by your account, they just ceased.
You can't just ride roughshod on people's beliefs and ideas without making a solid argument. If you say something is human right, show us from philosophical first principles why it is universal and even rational. I know you have an ex to grind because you're ex-Muslim. I'm ex-Christian, but I've got over it. Who says you have a right to commit adultery and cheat on your partner?
Who says you can stone someone to death because they have sex outside of marriage?
The state has
Do you understand that?
The state has the monopoly.
How dare you? How dare you say that someone should be stoned?
Apart from just your umbrage and, this is against the Western values that I've learned and imbibed. I'm sorry, you need a better argument.
People can have whatever the beliefs they want, but they cannot shove those beliefs down people's throats. Listen, you are defending killing people,
advice.
so don't you dare tell me I take my advice.
In the whataboutery there.
Yes.
No. Be consistent. When you criticize someone else, have consistent principles. It's not whataboutery. I demand from you, madam, and you, sirs, consistency when you criticize. You to hold to the same principles yourself.
Well, there's no doubt that hosting an event like the World Cup is a privilege, not a right. And with that privilege comes certain obligations. FIFA's own statutes prioritise human rights. They say that human rights are important and that competing nations must oblige and abide by them. Now, if you look at these particular games, you can see that despite the pledge of FIFA that no discrimination will be allowed, in fact, there are 7 competing nations where homosexuality is totally illegal.
Another argument could be made that human rights, okay, great, according to whose definition? Right, your definition, her definition, England's definition. If you took out all the players of all the teams, or you took out all the teams who their nations were involved in human rights abuses, you'd have no one, maybe except maybe Benin, perhaps playing, but most of the countries would have to be withdrawn because most countries are guilty of what you might human rights violations by your definition and by many other people's definitions.
Can I just pick? I'm not seeking to impose Western values on Qatar or any country. I'm asking all the countries of the world to uphold the principle of universal human rights, which apply here in Britain as well as in Qatar.
I'm no defender of Qatar. I'm no defender of many of the countries in the Middle East. I'm actually a very strong critic of them. I don't think they actually are fully Islamic, actually. There's pretensions to be. But I think what you said is, now as for what the Qatar security forces do, maybe that's debatable and disputable. I'm not the defendant of Qatar. Now, I'm only talking about Qatar law here, right? As for what Qatar does to the state, you can debate that, discuss that. Everyone will give you a different answer, perhaps. But I'm only here to talk about Qatar law and also Islamic law as well.
In Qatar, there is Sharia law, and it's not just a question of discrimination against gay people and LGBT, but also women are considered second-class citizens. for example, under Sharia, like in Iran, like in Saudi Arabia, like in Sharia courts here in Britain. You either stand with the Qatari state, the Iranian state, the Saudi state in its abuse of and discrimination against and violence against women, LGBT migrant workers, or you stand with those who want their basic human rights. And I think from our perspective, human rights matters. Of course, you don't want to ruin football for fans. Football and sports should be a way in which people all over the world unite with each other.
I'm sorry, Mariam,
but the fact is
you're actually
that.
quite hypocritical,
But the fact
Mariam,
is,
you know
the
that.
fact is. Sorry, don't talk over me. I know you're used to doing that,
No,
but don't do
we're
it.
just talking.
No,
Continue.
I haven't finished. But the point is that look, sports is meant to.
I want to answer something she said was quite egregious. She said human rights, which she supports ostensibly, as she claims, a Western definition of it, is about the right to choose to dress. And yet she is the person who said a couple of years ago that she would ban the burqa. And she said that I think every secularist and women's rights defender should support a burqa and niqab ban. So clearly she's a hypocrite when it comes to Muslims choosing what they want to wear, because she feels
Not at
that
all.
Muslim
Not
women
at all.
making that choice is somehow subjugating themselves, and she knows better. She can tell Muslim women what to do. They can't tell themselves
Let's let
what to do.
Mariam
So you are a hypocrite,
I
madam.
think
A
stop
hypocrite.
pointing your finger at me.
Why not?
I mean, the point is, look, of course, women have the right to veil. Everyone has the right to clothing. The point of the burqa is that it's a body bag on women. If men are so offended by women's hair and bodies, there are these masks that they put on donkeys so that their eyes will be covered. Men are free to wear those if they are so offended by women's hair and bodies. The point of it's not that women don't have the right to wear the veil or the right not to wear it if they choose. The point is that in countries under Islamic law, women don't have that right to unveil. They're imprisoned. As we know in Iran, Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old Kurdish woman, was recently killed because a few strands of her hair were showing. The difference is, though, with the burqa, it is a female body bag. It is a fabric erasure of women from the public space.
And also it reduces women to sexual objects because men must desire them, and it also reduces men to being the kind of people that can't control themselves around women.
And a nudist might make the same argument. A nudist might say that all those clothes you're wearing are body bags, which are sexualizing the human being, and only if we embrace nudism, and everyone should be deprived of the right to wear clothes, to protect them from subjugation, then they can be liberated and desexualized. So that same silly argument you made, and then a nudist could sit here, probably hopefully with clothes on, and make the same argument against you guys, that you're all wearing body bags and all kinds of clothes. So this is ridiculous. Why can't women choose? Why can't women choose to wear the niqab? Why do you support the ban,
I think that's
Mariam?
okay. So I think that's an interesting question. But aren't we all saying? Well, it sounds like we're all saying pro-choice. We want the women to have the choice. The issue is when they don't have the choice.
No, Amelia's highlighting her double standards and hypocrisy. She says
it's not because
rights about people having the right to choose what to dress, except Muslim women who want to wear niqab and have you. Maybe they feel more protected.
She's just said.
The veil is very different from the burqa and niqab, and I think that if men who promoted the burqa and niqab actually wore that, they wouldn't be as supportive of it. And also, the burqa and niqab are very much an Islamist flag, which is why they are so supportive of it constantly. And
your problem here, your contention is with the banning.
Is with her inconsistency when it comes to Muslims, denying Muslim rights in the West, and yet strongly calling for rights for people in, according to her definition, in the Muslim world.
I thought that
when we defend human rights, we often call for bans. For example, the ban on smoking in public spaces because it's detrimental. Secondhand smoke is detrimental to public health. We call for a ban on child labour because you support a ban on torture, a ban on execution, because banning things that are detrimental to human rights and human values is actually a step in the direction of defending human rights. And it's the same with the burqa. The burqa is a body bag for women. It is women carrying that wall of gender segregation on their very backs. And therefore, calling for a ban is actually in line with defending women's rights and human rights.
Okay, let's close this.
And a twisted argument worthy of the Chinese government, who wanted to get rid of extremism by banning people going to mosques, banning Qurans, banning a whole number of things in the name of defending Chinese values and rights. So please spare us.
Nobody's supporting
because
that.
I could make the same argument against you. I could say that society has a right to public decency, and therefore public displays of sex or sexual affection, more than just holding the hand, should be banned to protect people's right to public decency. I can turn that argument right back against you. You see, anyone can make the argument that of banning anything because of I'm going to insert right here, and then that means I have to ban a whole bunch of things. So give me a justified basis by which Islamic rights, it makes sense, don't make sense, and Western rights is somehow rational, even though, and not just an imposition.
Am I right in thinking
assertion.
that sometimes women get stoned in the streets in some of these countries?
Yes.
Where's the decency? Where's the public decency there? Where's the...
In fact, in Qatar, just 6 weeks ago, a female university student was stoned to death in a so-called honour killing by her family because she didn't follow the strict way in which women are supposed to behave.
Abdullah,
Stoned to death.
Does that law exist? Does that law exist?
Not in Qatar. And that is...
And it was not investigated by the Qatari authorities. The murderers got away with it.
Women get raped on the streets of UK all the time.
Well, that's all right then.
Murdered and raped. Should I now put that as an indictment against the West or indictment against Britain? You see, that's what you're doing. You're saying some criminals in the Muslim world do something bad. This must mean all Muslims are bad or Islam is bad. And yet your criminals do not represent your own state. Come on. Again, hypocrisy and double standards. Let's have a real conversation about Islam. Let's have a real conversation about what's happening in Qatar. Let's not having your axe to grind. I know you're saying you're ex-Muslim. You declare yourself ex-Muslim.
You insult that woman who was stoned to death. You ought to be ashamed of yourself.
No, I condemn.
The Qatari authorities. The Qatari authorities did nothing to investigate her murder.
I condemn it as much as I condemn women being raped and killed in the UK.
Peter,
stop interrupting.
Peter and Abdullah, we need, on the table, we debate...
It's not good enough to say, well, that's their culture, so this is the way they are, and we need to respect it. Because if we look at history and changes that have been made throughout human history and for human progress, it has all been as a result of challenging laws and rules that are discriminatory, homophobic, violence against women.
If I'd like to just chime in about the issue of the Qatar banning beer drinking. Now, they banned beer drinking before the World Cup. It's their laws. It's against taking intoxicants. For us, from an Islamic perspective, it's no difference to crack cocaine. In fact, alcohol kills more people than crack cocaine does, and yet it's allowed in the West. They tried at some point to ban it, it didn't work out so well. They just
why do they allow it? I'm really confused. Why do they allow it in some parts of, say, Dubai, for example? It's allowed if you're wealthy enough to be able to frequent...
All the corporate boxes that cost £22,000.
Because the Emirati government are hypocrites, and they don't really... some would say they don't really care so much about Islamic rules or laws anyway. They're here to make money. They've learned that from Western colonialism very well. But my point being is this. It's not about culture. It's not about some arbitrary set of traditions that people just happen to be with and we don't want to change them. No. The Islamic perspective is a worldview based on the creator of the universe being the source of good and bad. Good and bad has no meaning other than the purpose of human beings. What is good is fulfilling your purpose. What is bad is going against your purpose. There is no definition. A good car is a car that fulfills its purpose. A bad car is, so on and so forth. Good and bad has no meaning in the materialistic worldview that these guys inhabit, right? But they assert rights merely because it's whatever is currently in vogue in the West. And that's why, as Muslims, we would disagree. We'd say, look, give us your arguments. We're up for debate. We're up for discussion. In fact, I tried to debate Mariam Namansi once on a few things, and she actually backed out in a debate.
She's here now.
Have an open, great, exactly. Have an open debate. Have a discussion. Everything's up for discussion.
Okay.
But here's the thing. From the Islamic perspective, we believe that fornication, so any sex outside of marriage, is an abuse of the property of God, because the property owner does not give consent for it to be used in that sense. So in a sense, fornication. So the issue is.
And you can have up to 3 wives, is it? All for wives.
Can I
Well, you
just
can
add?
have a million girlfriends and cheating your wife in the West.
It's what about this and what about
what
that?
about it?
I just wanna show they
People
don't
have a
have it
right.
basis, that's all.
People have a right to
Just
their
be consistent
worldview,
when
of
you
course.
criticise
People
us.
have a right.
She said
their
that
property.
it's legal in Iran for people to go out on the street and somehow to stone women. That's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
That's the law. Stoning is the law. Stoning is the law.
I'm not defender of the Iranian regime. Again, I'm not a non-Islamic regime. It allows interest banking as well, like the rest of them do. Saudi Arabia, many other countries.
We're talking about
even
women's
though it's
rights.
strongly condemned in the Quran, very
Ask him
strongly.
about the women's rights, please.
But the thing is, we all believe that women and men have rights. Men and women have rights.
Yes, they're complementary. They're not equal
wait.
rights. Be honest.
Look
Be
who's now
honest.
speaking over and
Be
cutting
honest.
in now
No,
and
but be
shouting.
honest.
Okay,
yeah?
honest.
So,
Let's go. Let's
Be honest.
you're all up for shouting and speaking over people when it suits you.
Be honest.
Okay.
Abdullah, come on, let's
So
hear
anyway,
you.
what the state can regulate is anyone who has sex in public, whether they're straight,
No, in their
whether
homes.
they're homosexual, whether it's normal sex or sodomy, that's what's prohibited.
people
in
who were
Islamic law,
executed
excuse
for
me,
gay sex
excuse me, madam, would you let me
were
finish?
having
Yeah.
sex in public?
But now you're speaking over me. Let me finish,
don't
right?
think
So in Islamic law, the state can't ask what's happened inside the privacy of your own home. It is not the business of the state. There are multiple. I can bring you multiple
the
Islamic
problem
texts
is-
that argue that
Can we
point.
just-
You can't just ride roughshod on people's beliefs and ideas without making a solid argument. If you say something is a human right, show us from philosophical first principles why it is universal and even rational. The idea. And why do we, and it applies to both men and women, not to just women. Why do we only care if it only applies to women? It applies to men and women, right? Adulterers in Islamic law, from classical Islamic law, when they make their adultery public, which is it's virtually impossible. Yes, that you know that's impossible.
It's
Now
also
you are lying
based
about
on
Islamic
it's
law.
also based on confession. You know that. Listen, you
Yeah,
are not telling the
so-
truth.
So if someone
you are
wants
not
to,
telling the truth
let me finish.
because you
Let
think
me finish.
you can
So
talk
if someone
nonsense.
if someone wants to come and say, "I'm an adulterer, stone me."
Yes, because
you
if
say,
a
let me-
woman is
because you're
raped,
saying
if a
that was-
woman has sex outside of marriage or is raped and becomes pregnant, she can be stoned for adultery because
No,
the pregnancy
no,
is proof.
there has to
Second
be
of all,
a- no,
if there are witnesses, that is proof.
Okay, but
So you are lying.
Wait.
Is stoning
Let me-
part of Islamic
wait,
law?
you
Didn't
need-
Muhammad
Again,
say
she's
in a
speaking
hadith?
over me again,
Didn't
right?
Muhammad say in a hadith?
Okay, look, I
that
know you have an
stoning is
extra grime
permissible?
because you're ex-Muslim. I'm ex-Christian, but I've got over it.
Abdullah, we would settle this much quicker.
Just say you don't agree with stoning.
If you just answer the question, if you agree with stoning, that's your view and you're entitled to it. But give us a solid answer.
It's not my view. I'm
can't
only
say.
reporting Islamic law, which states that adulterers are executed if they make their adultery public.
Okay, and do you condemn the stoning of Islamic women, or men even, who make that public in the way in which you've described?
Are you telling me that do I condemn Islamic law?
Do you condemn people being stoned?
Well, that's what he's saying. He can't because
Yes
it's
or no?
not
That's
relevant.
Wait a second. Why is it relevant what I? Because
You're here talking about
I'm telling you
this.
what Islamic
Spent
law
the last
says.
half an hour defending tyranny. That's what
Yes,
you've been doing.
yes.
Not really.
Yes. So
Because who says you have a right to commit adultery and cheat on your partner?
Who says you can
says you
stone
do?
someone to death
So you
because
do
they
know.
have sex outside of marriage?
The state has
Do you understand that?
State has the monopoly.
How dare you?
States
How dare you say that
states
someone
have
should
the
be
monopoly.
stoned
In
because
America,
they have
you
sex
have-
outside
you
of
have
marriage?
execution
How
laws in
dare you?
America.
I don't agree
You
with
have
executions
execution
in the
laws in
US.
America.
I don't agree with executions anywhere. But you
Well,
will
and-
accept
and
executions
yet it exists.
if your
Okay,
Islamic
okay,
law does it.
okay,
How dare
okay,
you?
okay.
You should be ashamed of yourself. You
You don't
cannot
have a basis to
criminalize.
condemn them. Apart from
cannot
just your
criminal-
umbrage and, this is against the Western
You
values
do,
that I've
you
learned and
do.
imbibed. I'm sorry, you need a better argument than simply say, look at this Muslim who won't condemn his own religion. I'm sorry.
Nobody's asking you to-
I'm not
That's the
ashamed of
point.
my belief system.
Exactly.
We have a reason why we believe in God.
Exactly.
We have a reason why that we believe that good and bad is determined by the Creator.
You have a right to believe
So you
it.
have to. So you can criticize if you don't like
No,
it.
you can believe what you
produce
want.
an argument, but don't just simply say that Shibboleth questions: do you condemn your religion or not?
free will.
And whatever your religion is, whatever your choice is, we're going to judge you on
You
it.
have free
No,
will. You have
give
free
me an
will.
argument.
You are
Give me an
making a
argument.
decision to believe in that stuff. You have free will.
And
to
you
say,
have free will to believe in Western human rights, and not.
But also the difference is.
I wish you could just justify it.
Is the
Do you know
royal
what? Do you know
family,
what?
which has been a
just make a point?
dictatorship
With
for
democracy
over
is,
many
though.
years.
You know the problem with.
I'm sorry, there's a problem with democracy.
Yes, there is.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
The majority that gives you rights are the same majority that can take away your rights.
Oh, well, let's get rid of it then.
Can I just
No,
make a
no,
point?
no.
Last
That's
point,
why England
can
is
I
a
just-
democracy.
can I just
England is
make a
not a
point?
democracy.
Last point, I actually agree with you there.
And there are lots of people fighting against these laws in the Middle East, in North Africa, in South Asia, against religion in political power. That's the point we're making. So people can have whatever the beliefs they want, but they cannot shove those beliefs down people's throats in the law
I wish you
via
took your
the
advice,
state.
Mariam.
And also, listen, you are defending
I wish you took
killing
your
people,
advice.
so don't you dare tell me I take my advice. You have sat there
You want to
defending.
ban niqabs,
You have
want to ban
defended.
the burqa,
Listen,
and you dare
defend
Muslims-
stoning of women
tell,
and men to death.
tell Muslims
how
about
dare
rights,
you
please.
even speak
Please.
to any? How dare you even speak
Please.
about
It's when the state
rights?
the point she's
You are
making is when the
defending
state
states.
endorses
You are
those
defending
rights.
that. You are an
there is no
Islamist
state in this
that
country, there's no
defends the
state in this world
murder.
that does not endorse a particular moral worldview to base its laws
But
upon.
then there is the democratic
Okay.
right to try and
I'm
change
going to
You're a
move
liar
on. We're going to
and
move
you're
on.
a
We're
Who
going to move
decides?
on
That's
from this.
the only
It's very
question.
So what about the migrant workers? Let's go back to them. So 6,400, 500, I think, lost their lives in the build-up to the World Cup where they were building the infrastructure. Is that a big enough cause on its own to boycott?
If we decided to, as a boycott any particular country for its rights abuses, let's say England, they say, well, you know, wars around the world, bombing Afghanistan, wars in Iraq, America.
Thank goodness we voted out those governments
How
that did
long?
that.
How long list have you got? We'd only hold the World Cup in maybe Ireland and Switzerland, basically, because even then there might be issues. But so this is the issue: is that if we are going to raise the question as to whether we should associate our popular sporting events with countries we disagree, we have to be consistent about it. My only argument to the other side on this, whoever the other side might be, is just consistency. It's not whataboutery. It's like, you have a position, fine, apply it consistently. Don't just say, we'll make an exception for us, but for these Muslim countries and these third world people and these former colonies, we're going to be really hard on you guys on insisting our standards.
Sorry, I don't know. You were talking about, for example, we were condemning, or I was personally condemning, you know, having 3 or 4 wives, or as you refer to them, property. Now, over here...
Did I refer to them as property?
Yes, you did. Yes. You did.
I referred to wives as property.
Yes, you said it. We've got it on camera.
Yeah.
So,
I said wives are property.
You referred to women being property.
From the Islamic perspective, we believe that fornication, so any sex outside of marriage, is an abuse of the property of God, because the property owner does not give consent for it to be used in that sense. So in a sense,
owner,
fornication. So the issue is.
And you can have up to 3 wives, is it?
4.
4. We were condemning, or I was personally condemning, you know, having 3 or 4 wives, or as you refer to them, property. Now, over here...
Did I refer to them as property?
Yes, you did. You did.
I referred to wives as property.
Yes, you said it. We've got it on camera.
I said wives are property.
You referred to women being property.
Yeah, property of God.
Okay.
God owns all of us only. Like God owns me. God owns. I'm property of God. Okay. I don't mean property of human beings.
So, for example, you were defending having four wives, but you were countering that with, well, over here we can go and we can be unfaithful and we can cheat on our partners. There's a difference there. One is enshrined in law, and the other one is someone making terrible, bloody decisions.
Okay, well, here's the thing, right? If you believe that people should have the right to choose and consent and so on and so forth, then if people want to consent to be part of a marriage where there's more than one of them, then I don't see how you can make an argument against it. And you're going to mishear me if you cut me off, because what I was saying was that we're all the property of God alone. No human can be owned by any other human being in property from a far theological perspective. And so if you do something that's a sin, you are using God's property against the consent of the owner, which is only the creator. Not man, not women, no one else, no human being at all, no animal, only the creator owns.
How far does sin
I think that unfortunately, it's too late. I do think we should have boycotted the World Cup. But I do think that it is an opportunity to use the World Cup in order to promote human rights. I think that's key. From my perspective, of course, LGBT rights in Qatar, the rights of migrant workers in Qatar, the rights of women in Qatar.
So FIFA have said that they are stopping players wearing the One Love armband. So actually, any freedom of expression or speech is being cut down.
But some footballers are persecuted for wearing the Palestinian, kind of flags or armband or colours and so on and so forth. Say, they're being political. Some even accuse them of being anti-Semitic. So we see that even in the West, There is a denial of freedom of speech in many countries, and France is even worse than others. America, not so much. So, again, if we're going to speak out against freedom of speech, being denied in Qatar, what have you, we'd have to do the same.
I think we should start by...
are
lots of Muslims who
Muslims.
don't
Yeah, of
accept
course.
stoning. In fact, some of the people who are stoned to death are Muslims themselves. So it is very possible to be a Muslim and not to support stoning,
if you go to the prisons
not
in
to
the
support
UK,
child marriage.
Most of the
not to
criminals there would probably
support-
disagree with the
Four
laws that
wives.
put them in the first place.
We're back in the whataboutery there.
Yes.
No. Be consistent. When you criticise someone else, have consistent
I think
principles.
you
It's not
lose-
whataboutery.
I
I
think-
demand from you,
I
madam,
think you
and
lose
you, sirs,
legitimacy.
consistency when you criticise.
Listen,
you to hold to the same principles
You
yourself.
lose legitimacy when you cannot even condemn stoning. End of. Like, there is no further discussion.
Or lethal injection, or
again,
or the French Republic beheading people to 1972. I mean, come on.
we're talking about we're in
executions.
2020.
So you can disagree. It's not a problem.
It's not about
But
disagreeing.
produce a reason why.
It's about-
It's
it's about the-
just say, I assert that this is wrong. I assert this is right.
about
You just asserted
Give me
that stoning
arguments.
is right.
Don't give me rhetoric, please.
Because it's your belief. You just asserted
all
that
you've
stoning
given
is
us is
right.
rhetoric.
Because it's
You,
your-
you
I can
believe
give
that
you
stoning is right.
arguments.
You know,
It's
that's
your
fine.
belief.
You think people stoning to death is right. That's
Yes,
Islamic
that's
law.
what you say.
That's what
No,
you say.
I believe that the state should have a monopoly on executions, and with due evidence and due process.
And stoning can be one of them.
And many Americans would agree with me. So that's it.
Whataboutery again.
Okay, I was going to ask, are we
Oh
any better? Is it hypocritical to criticise? Now, one thing I do want to just bring into this is that we're all very focused here on these armbands, for example, or, taking the knee or what have you. But actually, our government, Johnson's government, did 2 trade deals with Qatar.
Totally
We've taken £10 billion worth of their investment. We're also, supplying the weapons that fall down in Yemen and kill innocent civilians and children and what have you. So actually, where is are we right to criticise?
I think we have to make a distinction between governments and the public. I think governments, I have no faith in any government, to be honest, not the British government, because I think it comes down to a matter of money and interest. And very often that money and interest is at odds with human rights. But I do have great faith in the public, and I think it is the public that can put pressure on both the Qatari government as well as the British government, on FIFA, to respect human rights. And I think that is what we need to do, is to get the public involved in taking a stand, because football is a game, of course, but it doesn't happen outside of a context. When there are massive human rights violations, we need to care about it.
And do you think that enough of that's happening now that we would never see the World Cup awarded again to one of these countries that's indexed really low down the human rights
I'm
chain?
so distressed to see that Greece and Saudi Arabia plan on doing a joint bid in a few years' time, and I mean that's awful. I think that would happen.
I think that I would agree with Maryam Namazi that, and it's the only time
Then I'm
that we
worried
should
about
make
what I said,
we should make
if you
we
agree
should make a
with me.
distinction between governments and people. Unfortunately, again, she doesn't listen to her own principles or advice, if it does.
Listen, someone who
Because
wants stoning
I'm
cannot-
talking now, madam.
So don't
Please,
talk about
please let
me.
me finish.
Don't talk about me.
You can
because-
respond.
No,
You can
don't say
respond,
someone
please.
like Maryam Namazi, because you
respond.
defend
I'm
stoning.
saying not someone like you. I'm saying you.
defend stoning.
Okay,
If
let's
I
let
may
him finish his point.
if I may
defend
finish my
stoning.
point,
Let
please.
him
Thank you.
finish
You defend stoning.
So when it comes to Muslim countries,
defend stoning.
both her and Peter cite vigilante violence done by families to killing their children or what have you, and they say,
State-sanctioned.
they say, look how bad that is.
State sanctioned, they said.
Let me finish, right? But then in the West, if a woman is raped and murdered and the police don't really investigate it or don't even care, and there's been many cases, no one says, oh, that's an indictment against the entire UK society. Muslims seem to get this different treatment whereby if vigilante violence done by criminals, which I'm calling them criminals, done by criminals, everyone gets to blame in that society. Whereas if vigilante violence is done not vigilante violence, but criminal violence is done, or the Western definition of honour killings, crimes of passion, because that's somehow now different, then we say, oh, well, that's not the state to blame, and even if the police don't investigate it, and most rapes don't get prosecuted
Feminists
in
are always
this
fighting.
country, and
Feminists.
yet you dare go and talk about women's rights
Feminists
outside.
are
Take your own
always
house
fighting.
first before you go talk about other people's houses.
What a shame.
First
in
of
the
all,
Middle
not
East.
everybody living in Qatar or Iran or Saudi Arabia are Muslims, and there are religious minorities, sexual minorities, and even when people are Muslim, they don't necessarily want Islamic law, and therefore, to call it the Muslim world is inaccurate in a large extent.
Muslim majority world, is that better? With regards to minorities and non-Muslims, Islamic law does not apply. It says it does not apply to non-Muslims. Christians used to get their own religious laws. Jews got their own religious laws. Zoroastrians got their own religious laws, even if we disagreed with them.
We're asking about violence against women.
May I?
I know.
She's not happy because I'm giving facts now about. I'm giving more nuances.
I'll be honest.
Okay? Islam doesn't enforce Sharia on non-Muslim minorities. Historically, they had their own court systems. They even had their own police. Right. So Islam is you could say it's only truly multicultural. Her organization it's called for one law for all, because in the secular systems, there can't be multiple law systems. There has to be one law for all, usually determined by the majority.
Hence,
in secular nation states, there's always a problem between the majority lording it over the minorities.
What about violence against women?
Dictating the majority's values over minority values. Where in Islam, everyone gets their own law system.
What about violence against women?
Defined by their own values. That is true multicultural. And as for marital rape, there is you're bringing some. You're trying to
use language that is. Yeah, we know.
It's
incorrect.
Incorrect. In Islam, men and women have a mutual right to each other's bodies. However, here's the point. You can't gain that by physical assault or physical violence, okay? That's the difference. So just because you have a right, an Islamic moral right, doesn't mean it can be gained any which way.
Like the Sharia judge here said, you can't call it marital rape. Calling it a rape is the actual act of aggression, because in a marriage, there's no such thing as rape, because men have the rights over their wives. You are lying.
I'm going to stop. I'm going to move on to the final question.
Rape would be violent assault, and that is prohibited.
Bullshit. I think, goodness me, I'm disobedient with my husband every day, probably.
As Winston Churchill said, I think it was Winston Churchill, I might be wrong actually, Britain does not have permanent allies, just permanent interests. And those interests are only somewhat aligned with principles where it is convenient for many of these Western countries to have principles. But when it's with a rich ally that can benefit them, then they don't care so much.
And our hypocrisy on that is a very fair point. Our hypocrisy, on one hand, condemning when we have a terror attack in the name of radical Islam in this country that kills, say, gay people, we're absolutely up in arms about it. But then we will
this country? Sorry, there was a terror attack that killed gay people in this country?
Yes, there was a Reading attack which killed 3 gay men who were sitting on a common in the name of radical Islam. Yet we will be horrified when that was about 3-4 years ago, something like that. But then
we're talking about the Soho attacks where a far right guy. Nail bombs.
That was 29 years ago. That was the Admiral Duncan, and that was a far right terror attack. But what we do then is we will witness these absolutely awful Islamist attacks in this country when that happens to gay people. Yet we'll then trade with the countries that decide to execute them when they're one and the same thing, as far as I'm concerned. They are radical and they are wrong.
Well, again, I'd object to the term Islamist because it implies that Islam condones terror attacks when Islam has rules of warfare that prohibit the killing of non-combatants. And it is agreed upon all schools of thought in Islam that killing of non-combatants or such as terror attacks involve is categorically prohibited. Osama bin Laden made an argument.
His only said it was in the name of radicalism.
No. Osama bin Laden, his argument was, if you see there was a book that compiled his sayings. He argued that the West doesn't care about civilians when it bombs Muslim countries. So he argued that he has permission to imitate the West in using Western tactics against themselves. That was his argument. He said that the Quran, he knows what the Quran says, he knows what the Prophet Muhammad said.
Do you disagree with that him doing that?
Well, he goes against the Quran and Prophet Muhammad by his own admission, but he said that he has special permission to do so because the West, he's retaliating to the West against their injustice, and so he will adopt their tactics. And I'm against adopting the Western tactics, which are brutal and monstrous against non-combatants. Bombing civilians, I think, is wrong.
Any criticism of Islam, which is a belief, and all beliefs should be open to criticism, and criticism of far-right movements, which is what the Islamists are, is very often equated with bigotry against Muslims. And of course, that's not the case. You can oppose The Christian right, you're not attacking Christians.
You want to ban the burqa.
You can.
That is
Listen,
against
you
Muslim
support
rights.
stoning, so I wouldn't talk if I was you.
You want to ban the burqa. You want to ban Muslim women's rights
want
to choose to
stone
wear the
people
burqa and
to
niqab.
death.
Okay.
Irrelevant.
Defend
Irrelevant.
violence against
So again,
women.
spare us your hypocrisy, Mariam,
You have
please.
no right
We've
to
gone
speak
full
about rights.
circle, and that has been a very...
Don't do it.
I
It's
think-
embarrassing
I
for you.
think this is... Okay.
السلام عليكم. لا تنسوا الإعجاب بالفيديو والاشتراك في القناة تشجيعا لنا لنستمر بنشر المزيد إن شاء الله.